Sì, prova, prova. Ok.
Inglés, francés van a hablar. Inglés, van a hablar en inglés y en francés y en español. Timana.
¿Sabe entonces cómo es el horario ahora o no cambia?
Una hora de retraso.
¿Y sigue igual o por otro?
A las 5:30 se acaba. Es una hora.
Gure provinciala, ahora vamos a producir, no te vamos a apoyar. ¿Qué estás Pero no porque la producción, ¿no? Yo estaba con un sueño lunático y no me echaba así, pero muy bonita. Pero la pena es que al día no, todo lo que es más.
Se cayó ayer, se
La hermana ahumada, ¿sabes qué?
they're ready.
Well, thank you. Somebody said we were in Rome, and they said we need to get names of people, and the master of the order came and said, yeah, we have the Congress. He said that you don't want to just hear from Dominican. So let's bring people. And I said, I know somebody.
I know somebody.
from Rome.
Thank you.
Bonsoir. Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon.
Sorry for the delay. Désolé pour le retard. Disculpen el retraso, pero vamos a introducirnos, vamos a comenzar la sesión de esta tarde.
We're going to begin this afternoon's session. We have already prepared the moderator and the panelists of this afternoon's plenary, which will now be connected with the rest of the order all over the world thanks to technology. I begin by presenting the moderator of this afternoon's session, Brother Jesus Diaz-Salero, doctor and professor of theology, and expert in hermeneutics, a tool which, among other aspects of his person, he uses with wisdom in exercising his work as prior provincial of the province of Hispania. His service is enriched by a global vision of the challenges of Dominican preaching. With him to his right is Joaquino Camprese, missionary of San Carlos, theologian, expert in missiology. He's lived 8 years in Tijuana, Mexico, as vice director of the Welcome House of Miguel Angel. He's also been committed and is committed with the pastoral work with migrants, both in the U.S. and in Italy. He is a professor specialist in pastoral theology. Among other activities that he currently engages in, he's also professor in Rome, at an institute in Rome. Joaquino.
A la izquierda de...
To the left of Brother Jesus is Sister Marcela Soto Ahumada, coordinator of the Dominican family in Bolivia, promoter of justice and peace for Codalc. From Cochabamba, she works as a theologian and professor from both perspectives of as a woman and Latin American, integrating theological dialogue with the worlds of mestizo, people of African descent, and indigenous cultures, looking at the exclusion and exploitation of women, the creation of spaces of equality in society.
Next to him, we see a Dominican brother who is president of the Commission of Human Rights at Burundi, Emmanuel Nekatulumana, a doctor in fundamental theology and politics for the University of Fribourg. He's expert in international human rights law and also works in development of psychosocial programs to resolve conflicts in order to build peace and reconciliation in Burundi. Thank you to all.
Gracias.
Thank you, Brother Javier. Good afternoon to all. Good afternoon to those who accompany me on this meeting, in this conversation, this first module that we begin in the Congress, and which, as all of you know, will address the word that gathers us together, the word humanity. And so I would like to send a special greeting from here from Rome to all of the internet, all the cybernauts who are now following us on the internet. As preachers, without doubt, we have been reflecting throughout this morning. Each and every one of us has experience of what the word humanity evokes for us. Some of those experiences are the ones that we're going to hear this afternoon here. And perhaps to focus our attention on the three presenters, which will lead us, will direct to us their words based on their experience, I would invite you, each and every one of you, to penetrate more deeply in the thought of the other, and to enter also into the experience of the other, which quite often is an experience of pain and suffering. The three presenters who have been presented will touch on various topics, problems, which will touch upon the thought and experience of the other. I would also like to say to all those who follow us on the internet that in the development of this session, as it moves forward, you may also send questions that you consider germane by Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube. But entering in the hashtag OP800. And you can send the questions during the discussion. You don't have to wait. And so I cede the floor to Brother Joaquino Campese, who will speak to us of a dimension of an aspect of our humanity that is extremely important, and that is, we could say, described by the word migrants. And now I give you the floor. Does it work? Oh, yes.
Pomeriggio, buenas tardes a todos. Gracias.
Thank you. Before beginning, the presentation will be in English, but before I begin, I'd like to greet someone who I just saw in front of me, because we saw each other, I think, about 15 years ago, in the House of the Migrants in Tijuana. Brother Raul Vera, you're still there in Mexico, no? It's a pleasure to see you. So I'm going to...
And you see, this is the title of my presentation, short presentation. You know, some food or some fast food for thought in terms of migration and pastoral and theological reflection on migration. I entitled since the main theme of this Congress. To which, you know, I am honored to be invited, is sent to preach the gospel. So my question is, sent to preach the gospel where or when? And my thing is sent to preach the gospel in the age of migration. So that's the... And follow me, I will have a few pictures also to show. I think that, as they say, pictures speak more than 1,000 words. And here you see, here we have an idea what migration, how migration is developing today. What are the journeys of migrants today? What is interesting, for example, about this picture is that this young man is taking a selfie. You know, is migration in the digital era. Is migration in the postmodern world. Is migration in the selfies era. And in the middle of nowhere, this young guy is taking this selfie together with a group of people. Most probably they are crossing a border somewhere in Europe, in order in their journey toward Europe. So I want to start with something that comes from Evangelii Gaudium, 154, number 154. And I will read just the first lines, because those are the lines that have inspired me in this short talk. The preacher also needs to keep his ear to the people and to discover what it is that the faithful need to hear. A preacher has to contemplate the word, but he also has to contemplate his people. This was also a sentence that was repeated during the address that the Pope Francis gave to the participants to your latest general chapter in Bologna. So what touched really me, what inspired me, what does it mean to preach today? You have to contemplate the word, and you have to contemplate also the people. There is not one without the other. Both have to go together. Now, the outline of my presentation. I will speak very briefly about what is the age of migration, and I will use picture to kind of give some ideas what is the age of migration. I will say something about contemplating the word. I will say something about contemplating the people, and I will say something also about preaching a different story. What is the different story that we have to preach in the age of migration? And then I will finish, of course, with some questions that have been requested, I think, to all panelists. So the age of migration. Migration is in the DNA of humanity. You know, it is inevitable, dimension and a necessary dimension of the human race. It has always existed. Humanity exists because of migration. Well, the church exists because of migration. Christianity exists because of migration. This is why I wanted to start with this painting of Jacopo da Bassano on the flight to Egypt. What is interesting about this painting, there is not only the Holy Family, but there are other people, on the journey toward Egypt. So that was really interesting about the Now, some pictures about the journeys of migrants, who the migrants are. Those, who have been in Mexico, who have been in Central America, know what is this picture about. It is the picture of the train, the cargo train that starts basically from Central America and brings the migrants and the cargos also almost to the border between Mexico and the USA. The train that is called La Bestia, the beast, because many people are dying also during this journey. So this is one of the phases of migration today in our world. This is another phase of migration in our world, in the age of migration, and it is a picture of the latest journeys of refugees, asylum seekers that are coming from the Middle East, from Africa, etc., and coming to Europe. Something that is scaring, the European countries, the European continent, and the Europeans themselves. And faced with this phenomenon, we don't know what to do. And we will see, some of the reactions toward this phenomenon. Yeah. And you see that there are very young people involved. Very young people involved. I think that the latest statistics about the number of minors who are involved in these journeys toward Europe is I think from 25 to 27% of all these asylum seekers, let's call them this way, who go toward Europe. This is another interesting picture, It reminds me, the little kid, against the wall. And the little kid has no fear. He's not afraid of that wall, of big people with shields, It is like David against Goliath. This is another picture that tells the story of migration today, what's happening now, especially in Europe. Who are the migrants? What they do? And here I have a picture of the thousands, of the hundreds of thousands of domestic workers, who take care of our elderly people, of our children in our homes. Who are the migrants? They are the people who work, in our agricultural fields. This is true not only in Italy, but I have seen many of them doing that in Guatemala, in Mexico, especially in the USA. And migrants, do many other kind of jobs. Usually they are they say that they are the demanding job, the dirty jobs, etc. But who are the migrants? Are also those who are integrating into society. Here we see, and I put this on purpose, the picture of a let's say, mixed race, I don't know if I am using the right words, family, here in Italy, where an African woman has married, an Italian man, and they are starting, a new, these are the new Italians. These are the new Europeans. This is also migration. This is one of the consequences of migration. Now, contemplating the word. What does the word say? What does the Bible say about migration? I am kind of, I won't present just the positive picture about migration that we find in the Bible. No, I believe that we have to tell the whole, we have to give the whole pictures about contemplating the word of migration, the migrants and refugees in the Bible. Leviticus, we have, when an alien resides with you in your land, you shall not oppress the alien. The alien who resides with you shall be to you as the citizen among you. You shall love the alien as yourself, for you were aliens in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. And this is repeated many, many times, especially in the Old Testament, in the Torah and also by the prophets. Remember that you were alien. Remember that you were a migrant. And I don't like actually the term alien, because it reminds me of the alien, this extraterrestrial bad, nasty beings that come from the outer space in order to destroy humanity. You were immigrant in the land of Egypt. The role of memory, the role of memory in our theology, in our theology of migration is very important, is central. And here I have a quote from a Puerto Rican Protestant theologian who says, and rightly so, how comforting it would be to stop right here with this fine biblical text of xenophilia, of the love of the stranger. But the Bible happens to be a disconcerting book. It contains a disturbing multiplicity of voices, a perplexing polyphony that frequently complicates our theological hermeneutics. What he says in this article, I also say this article appears in an issue of the Ecumenical Review of 2012. What he says, what Rivera Pagan says in this article, that in the Bible you can find xenophilia, the love of the stranger, but you can find also xenophobia, the fear of the stranger. And the same thing happens in a book written by another Susanna Schneider, an Anglican theologian, who has written this very interesting book, Asylum Seeking, Migration and the Church, in which she says that, you know, in the Bible, both in the Bible and in reality, you can find the ecology of faith and the ecology of fear. The ecology of faith is an environment in which, you know, trust and compassion affect the ways of thinking and the practices of people. The ecology of fear is an environment in which fear affects the ways of thinking and practices of people. You can find both. And one of the most, probably what I consider the most interesting text in the Bible and in the Gospel about the presence of both the ecology of fear and the ecology of faith, about the xenophilia and the xenophobia, is the Matthew 15, 21 to 28. The Canaanite woman, the healing of the daughter of the Canaanite woman. We have also the parallel text in Mark 7:24 to 30. And you see this back and forth between this dialogue, this interesting dialogue, this wonderful dialogue between Jesus, among Jesus, the disciples, and the woman. The woman insists because she wants Jesus to heal her daughter, and Jesus at the beginning not even speaks to her. And when she speaks to her, she says, "You know, I was just sent to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. I was not sent to the pagans. I was sent only to the Israelites. You know, to the Jewish people." And in front of when the lady, the woman, the Canaanite woman insists, "Lord, help me," Jesus says, "It is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." The ecology of fear, xenophobia, we find it in Jesus. But then there is the conversion. But it is not the conversion of the woman. It is the conversion of Jesus. In my reading, because at the end what he says is, "Woman, great is your faith." In the Gospel of Matthew, we find two people of which it is said, of whom I think it is said that their faith is great. And it is the Canaanite woman, a pagan woman, and it is also the centurion, the Roman centurion in Matthew 8. It is the strangers who have the great faith, and not the Jewish people, not the chosen people. Interesting. The ecology of fear and the ecology of faith. Xenophilia, xenophobia in the Bible. Now, we have to contemplate also the people. And what do we see in the people? When we go around, one of the things that I am doing besides teaching is I am also working in a center that we have started one year and a half ago to promote welcoming and the idea of integration and inclusion of refugees here in Rome, in our territory, in Italy, etc. And in this is Casa Scalabrini. We have given the name of our founders, Casa Scalabrini 634. You could find it in. We have our website and Facebook and all that stuff. And what we find when we go around to the schools, talking about the issues of migration, talking about migrants and refugees. When we go to the parishes to talk about migrants and refugees, what do we find? We find in the people the effort to understand that to encounter migrants and refugees. We find lots of compassion, effort to understanding the people, effort to solidarity. We find assistance, we find hospitality, we find accompaniment, we find advocacy. People really work so that the laws about migration can be changed, unjust laws, and which is done with passion and compassion. But at the same time, we don't find only that. We find, as we said before, in terms of the contemplation of the world, we find also the ecology of fear. And we find also among the people, but not just among the people in the streets, you know. We find among the people who come to the church, among the faithful, those who come to church every Sunday, people in the pews, we find fear, hostility, rejection, anger. And this makes me think, you know, this makes me, you know, it is something that is one of the biggest issue, in my opinion, one of the greatest issues that we have to face as Europeans, as Italians, here in terms of our ministry with migrants and refugees. Then we find migrants and refugees themselves, who are courageous people, determined people, resourceful young people, but also people who feel lost, who need accompaniment, who need orientation, who need affection, who need friendship. And here I end this part saying, you know, as Hebrew, the letter to the Hebrews in 13 verse 2 says, you know, that when you give hospitality, you are giving hospitality to angels without knowing it. Yeah, it goes back, you know, to Abraham and in chapter, I think chapter in Genesis, or I don't remember the chapter. They are angels in disguise. Of course, refugees and migrants are angels in disguise, but you know, let's not try to angelize them, you know, to romanticize them. You know, but everywhere, you know, migrants and refugees could be good people, and there are also some, you know, not so good people. They are people like us. They are us. We are migrants. We are refugees. I guess that many in this room have had, you know, have the experience of migration in their own families, in their own roots, you know. Now, we want to preach a different story. As we go out and to the schools and to our parishes and to other, you know, groups to speak about migration and to try to raise awareness about this issue of migration, we understand that this is really a hard task. It has always been a hard task. 20 years ago, I remember very well, I was in Casa del Migrante in Tijuana, and I went to visit a diocese in the USA, border diocese. And I met the person in charge of youth ministry. So I was talking to this person, and I told him, you know, maybe we should get together and we should do something, you know, some kind of formation, some kind of meeting, something, you know, about the issue of migration. And he told me, you know, we don't speak here about migration because it is too controversial. This is happening, this was 20 years ago. This is happening now, here in Rome. This is happening now, here, not only here, but, you know, in some other places in the world. It is difficult, it is hard, it is controversial to speak about migrants and refugees. Because people tend to get angry about this, tend to get fearful about this issue. And what I have noticed is that people often adjust their prejudices and negative representation, which are supplied by the media to rely upon, because there are only few institutions and people who are trying to deal constructively and positively with the transformation caused by migration. And sometimes, and unfortunately, the church is not among them. The church is not present. People, I think they see, I have seen in many, especially peripheries here in Rome, they see the world around them changing, being transformed by this incoming of so many migrants. My neighborhood is changing. What do I do about that? They don't have the tools to deal with that. Politics does not give them the tools to deal with that. Mass media does not give them the tools to deal with that properly. That's why I was saying in the previous sentence, because some of the wells, of these wells, the wells of mass media, the wells of politics, are already poisoned. And they are poisoning our people. They are poisoning the people who go to church. They are poisoning our faithful. They are poisoning the people in the pews. So what do we do about that? We need, so I say here, we need counter-narratives and good practices of reciprocal hospitality, which show that with patience, hard work, faith, and hope, it is possible to create a culture of dialogue and encounter, again, Pope Francis. It is possible to establish sound human relationships among people who are different, culturally and even from the viewpoint of religion. It is possible so to build up healthy intercultural and interreligious communities. And this is one of these are among the greatest tasks that we have in front of us here in Europe and in other countries in the world. I am just think about what is going to happen, and I hope it will not happen in the USA now with Trump. Who has said lots of things about migrants. He wants to deport all the migrants, irregular migrants. He wants to build the walls, and he wants Mexico to pay for the wall. Yeah, they will pay it, of course. They will pay for that wall. He doesn't want Muslims. He doesn't want etc. etc. Each one of us maybe are invited to think about the context in which we live and we minister, and say what is the different story that we have to speak, and we have to communicate about migration. Here I end with my question. Yeah, I am just on time. So, and my three questions are these, do the voices of migrants and refugees and people who welcome and live with them find room in our preaching? Do the voices of migrants, but not only of migrants and refugees, but also the people who welcome them, also the fear and the anger of people who receive migrants, who are in receiving countries, has to find some room in our preaching, in my opinion. We have to deal with it. Actually, it is urgently needed to deal with it. What are migrants and refugees preaching to us? And what should characterize our preaching in the age of migration? Thank you very much for your listening.
Thank you, Joaquino. Gracias.
Thank you for having come to dialogue from the perspective of the gospel with this human reality, which is the world of migrants and refugees. And also thank you for presenting and connecting their experience to the gospel. And now, the one who will speak is Sister Marcela Soto, who will present to us about care for creation. I would ask you to please pay special attention to key words that she will use in her presentation, such as the word woman and the faces that are behind many women who she doubtless knows in the reality of Bolivia and also in the realities of other countries in Latin America and the world. I will speak of humanization, which is the call to a good life. that may lead to liberation and salvation of souls. There are countries that I remember are countries of the sea or of the river, according to Gabriela Mistral. It is a reality that today makes us feel impotence, indifference, or perhaps a commitment to history. And according to Gabriela Mistral, she says that things that are in the past are no longer here, like water, the great forests, the open doors. But I do not wish to remain in the past, nor to have a negative vision. As Nicanor Parra, the poet, would say, the modern world is a sewer. It is temptation. But there is a dehumanizing reality that it cannot be denied, very far from the dream of God, of the great fatherland that Simon Bolivar testified to. Or like the poet who says, I have big dreams which acquire treasures in the roots of trees. And so we go on our way among dreams and sewers and hopes. The statistics say everything. They say it all. These numbers and percentages shock us, and they generate either fears or hopes. But they don't touch the deeper dimensions of life, the systems that rule humanity in different corners of the world. Because of them, we find that disequality, inequality grows, injustice grows, lies grow, violence grows. Whole peoples who flee or who simply seek a better life and are encountering other cultures, other ways of life. Plurality and diversity have an impact on the faces we encounter and on beliefs. We might ask, where is your God? In the place where I live, Cochabamba, Bolivia, we are impacted by the crisis of water. Where I live in Cerro San Miguel, we only receive once a week water. Other times, not even that. I was born near a river that would overflow, used to overflow. And in the south of Chile, near a great river, the widest in Latin America, which would actually overflow once a year. I never thought that we would come to live this extreme situation of lack of water. So, like, for example, this situation of having only once a week water. On the other hand, there's also the Popo Lake, which is at the... And so we encounter every day this incoherence. And there's also an increased production of coca leaves, which leads to the traffic of narcotics. There's no water, lack of electricity. Also, the murder of women, femicide, has increased, as has violence. There's much arson, which also has increased pollution. Smoke, which covers corruption and projects with no future. There are events that are supposed to create events, social things that are supposed to help society, but actually don't. We may sing and ask, will love and the truth grow in the human heart? But the Holy Bible says, these hands, your hands, make this gesture. We share destiny as sisters and brothers. Dominicans, Dominican men and women. What is our position before reality? Are we affected by what happens in our immediate world where we live, where we move and live? What salvation or liberation can we preach about? Where are our feet and our heart as Dominican men and women, do we share the destiny and the table of those who are destroyed, of victims of war, of refugees? Before this reality, Dominican preaching gets its meaning, we must be attentive. We must be near to the reality of those who suffer, to be conscious of these presences and where we are, sometimes far from what God asks of us as Dominican women and men. In Salamanca, as we said, where are Dominican women and men? The Lord says, I have come that you might have life and have it abundantly. I came that you might have life and find fullness. This generous reality, which comes to give us hope, also empowers human beings. Why does this happen? A few are in charge of what should belong to everyone. They have made themselves owners of life for peoples. How do we build the reign of God? With dignity, with respect, with justice. It's a life that must be protected, accompanied from predators. The Lord insists on the great promise mentioned by the prophet Isaiah. I will create a new heaven and a new earth. In the letter of Peter, also a new heaven and a new earth, a world which will grow justice, and which is affirmed by the apocalypse of John, new earth and a new heaven. It is the invitation to not stop dreaming or beginning again, to maintain hope alive and creative, in order to open new horizons, in order to generate harmony amidst disharmony, rebuilding spaces where there could be diversity and interculturality. This is where trust has been lost, where truth has died, where life dies. The Lord affirms that he has been anointed for something very good, to heal and to save. We, women and men, have been chosen in baptism, anointed to continue Christ's legacy. In his name we announce not only, but also take on his cause. We find the profound sense of freedom in the following poem, which says, freedom is something that beats in our insides like thunder. It moves us to do that which God wants of us, transforming our Dominican lives, filling others with a desire to seek liberation and salvation. I ask you, and I challenge us to ask ourselves, do we live with this passion? Living for the reign of God? On whose side are we? On the side of power? Of those who are... Where would Dominic be today? The Lord preaches from a compassionate heart. Nothing demoralizing. We don't find anything demoralizing in the story of the woman caught in adultery. We see that these men who wanted to accuse her realize that they are not free of guilt when they want to condemn her. We, from our own fragile and vulnerable realities, we walk by the hand of God, who knows much of infinite mercy. How do we accompany, how are we present to the reality of so many abandoned women, beaten, children who are discarded and abandoned, peoples who go hungry? Are we a hollow word or a compassionate word? And this is where the challenges come. If it comes from a permanent encounter with a God who sends us to be on the side of humanity, it will be a compassionate word. And so we cannot be silent before in the face of injustice. And so we say, like Montesinos, are we not human? Or are they not human? Are they not people? Are they not men and women? Are they not my brothers and sisters who have the right to live with dignity, respected in their totality, loved? The Lord desires wisdom in our manner of living as Dominicans, women and men. He wants us to savor the word and the encounter with the brother and with humanity, but not in a superficial way, that the superficial way that the market proposes, which we sometimes cannot escape. It is necessary to invoke the spirit of wisdom in order to know how to be there in the midst of exhaustion of women and men who come, in the case of Bolivia, to the city from the country to work for just a few pennies, to be able to look at the faces of children and of young people who live with their grandparents because their parents have migrated to other countries for a better life. To put ourselves in the place of the other when situations of conflict emerge, justified by laws. Resist companies and to resist corporate interests that also oppress. Dominican women and men called to preach a word of hope, because it is a critical and questioning word. It's a prophetic word, and not a word that simply assuages the one who suffers. It is one that calls others to be protagonists with dignity of their own history. It's the word of a humanized God, because God lives in me and in you. A word full of light before the one for whom all doors have closed. A word that helps us to see the path of truth and not of condemnation, or that can bear all things because God is the light of the world. It is God who saves by means of human beings, through human beings. A word that is always listening, encountering the other, especially the one who suffers, and that does not leave the preacher in peace, that is always attentive to the cry of the poor, filled with compassion that Jesus had for others, according to as Pope Francis says. And so it is possible to generate, as we say, a way of life, a good way of life for all women and men, taking charge of the work of God and a new life for the world. Thank you very much.
Porque nos has dejado claro.
Since you've made it clear that death and that life and truth die there, then where we should be is where the gospel is. For those who follow us by internet, by Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube, I'd like to remind you that you can now send your questions, those that you may consider germane, to hashtag OP800. And now I have the honor to give the floor to our brother Emmanuel Takagrutimana, who will offer us a new aspect of the conversation that we have begun this afternoon, because he will speak of peace and reconciliation, but perhaps with an important nuance: how to preach the gospel of mercy when there are wounds, historic wounds, present in our peoples, in our homes, and in our cities. In a particular way, he will bring us the voice of Burundi. And now to Brother Emmanuel.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. I came the day before yesterday on Alitalia, but my luggage didn't follow. And so I'd like to thank the Irish lay Dominican Duncan, who has lent me his polo shirt. Otherwise, I'd be... And I know there are many small acts of kindness and solidarity between ourselves. So as you have heard, I would like to speak about preaching mercy in a situation of historic wounds. And I'm going to do it in four stages. Historic wounds. Secondly, I will remind you how we are faced with the complexity of problems and agents, as we've heard today and yesterday. Thirdly, I will show a bit the difficulty of making a holistic view about the consequences of historic wounds, which are very varied. And finally, I will ask myself the question, what spirituality of charity, active, of efficacious charity, do we need today? Firstly, the historic wounds, memory of wounds. To put a link between the gospel, preaching, and humanity. I would like to begin with my own context, that of my brothers and sisters in Africa of the Great Lakes, in this region where we live, great challenge of living memories which have been wounded. The reality of memory is something which should be very familiar to us, which ought to rather be very familiar to us. From another Christian context, since we celebrate the wounded memory of Christ every day, a remembrance which was converted into a triumph over death in the resurrection. A remembrance of the Christ which brings us back to God. A God who marries the whole of our fragility and our humanity in order to subsume it into a new horizon where life triumphs over death, the truth over lies, love over hate. This choice God made in Jesus Christ works itself out in an efficacious love, in expressing compassion and mercy. And we see this on many occasions in the Bible. This is what we see in the preaching of Jesus. And it's what St. Dominic so carefully noticed before going on his journeys to live a freedom which opened him constantly to the gift of his own life. But as we know, things are not so simple. And so I would like to begin from the difficulty, the delicacy of how we remember things, as a kind of ecology of the Dominicans in the area of the Great Lakes. I'm from Burundi, as you have heard, a small country. This region of the Great Lakes has been ravaged by cycles of violence and war, by a violence which has been lived through since the 1960s, but in these last few years has been particularly terrible. The last 5 years, these atrocities which have shocked the world, as you will have seen on the images of the Rwandan genocide, and now you can imagine people who have lived through this, how can they forget it? And what could be their life after it? Or what could their reaction be? These survivors, the widows, the orphans. And these dramas continue today. You've seen in the situation in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, in Burundi, where the president has developed a political messianism which giving a new paradigm of democracy. You have the fragility of the processes in the Central African Republic, South Sudan. So it's a very vast and very unstable region, and yet a region which has great riches, resources. And all this violence reminds us of what happens in other parts of Africa and many other countries, whether in Africa or other continents and regions in the world. And sadly, I'm touched when I see what's happening in Iraq, Syria, Pakistan, Afghanistan, in Colombia, and many other regions of the world. These images of migrants who are living through historic wounds now. This recent violence adds itself to all the previous historic wounds which have generated veils of traumas diffused over very large territories. And these different conflicts have generated cycles of violence and reinforced context of poverty. And this has a terrible, devastating effect because many human lives have been lost. Many people have kept terrible memories. Many people have lost their territory or their property. The social fabric has been rent asunder, and family situations have been broken. And the experience of suffering and pain is encrusting itself, penetrating the person. And this plays on their reactions, their worldview, the way they behave. And sadly, the grand lobbies in the local area with their international allies talk about struggle for land and resources, and divisions between ethnic groups and prejudices and nationalisms in order to justify their military actions and affirm their domination. And today, we live through the consequences of everything that's happened. But the situation touches specifically women, particularly women, because many among them are wounded in a very profound intimacy in their life with rape, with the phenomenon of human trafficking, with children, and young people who see their hopes broken and who do not know how they're going to manage their professional careers in the future or their family life in future. So this question of wounded memories. In some people, they live wounded memories for 50, 60 years, and there's no therapy, no social therapy or political therapy, where the economy is going down the chute, and it's working out in more violence and a time bomb. Then there's a problem of complexity and the agents. I'm not going to speak too much about this because we heard a bit yesterday, but the availability of natural resources, mineral resources, especially in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, in Sudan and elsewhere, this means that there are strong, powerful interests, global interests, including the United States, European states, China, a growing number of people from the South, global South, and Latin America. They are more and more present in this region of the Great Lakes in a situation of war and conflict. And they continue to ravage the territory. And here we're asking people to come to reconciliation. How will this be possible when they have to confront these lobbies, global lobbies, which have a enormous power? So they are very organized, very well structured. And so we who come with the gospel, we are not structured, don't have the same power as them. But the gospel is not one of power. Jesus did not want to bring an instrument of power. Much money has been spent on reconciliation and conflict resolution, and many religious groups have participated in this. But it's today very important, necessary still to restore confidence and hope, to create safe spaces, a dialogue so it continues in a structured way. We have to develop energies for welcoming and confidence, whether it's individually or collectively. And it's also about showing the closeness of God, who is attentive and suffers. And it's very important that these initiatives function in synergy in such a big area with the promoters of justice and peace, given the complexity of the problems and so many forces, international players. It would be useful to reinforce collaboration in the Dominican family, as well as both in local, national, and international levels. It's perhaps by giving more strength and force to the presence of the Dominican family in the UN and other international arenas, to show that smaller groups can have this impact. Thirdly, what holistic vision regarding these historic wounds? I said at the Congress in Salamanca, in fact, what's happening, what we're talking about, touches a lot of areas and topics. We imagine the large numbers of people wounded or killed, the refugees and migrants, in a context of destruction and lack of food and resources and human resources, a humanitarian catastrophe. But it's also the political dimension. There are global processes, integration of states, heightening of corruption, and the impact of Western powers. And then there's the material and economic power, financing the machine of war. This costs a lot of money which ought to work for development, destruction of infrastructure and boycotting. And for this war machine, sadly in our countries, we are sent used weapons which have no longer used elsewhere and are sent to us, while new weapons are being tested in other places like Afghanistan and Syria. We become a depot for arms, old arms. There's an ecological impact. There's a cost a social cost, the breaking of families and communities, orphans, rape, and so on. A cultural cost, with a loss of cultural treasures. There's a psychological cost, with stress, permanent stress, traumas. If you go into our areas, you would see so much suffering from domestic violence, which has gone up, alcoholism, drug use, and a spiritual cost, with a breaking of our values and the sense of life. And how can we work our preaching to touch on these different costs and bring back hope at the level of whole populations? And so in the end, what spirituality of an effective love can we have? A few years ago, when I heard about justice and peace as well as human rights as one of the main priorities of the mission of the order, I had an intellectual and abstract vision of this. I was far from seeing what it would mean concretely when it's about confronting a daily reality with services to reinforce our state, things in the state, the police, administration, organizations, political organizations, and to work with magistrates, with activists in civil society and other partners in the church especially, all the while putting oneself completely, one's humanity before God. All this asks that we continually to look at the crucified Christ and look at the Holy Scriptures. We've said this before. It demands investing oneself into an interior space which gives one the taste for compassion and the mercy of God towards humanity. And you all have already seen that this work takes so much energy. It takes a spiritual life, a rhythm. To keep building the foundations, we need time of prayer. And I hadn't so often read the book of Jeremiah, Isaiah, and the other prophets, Amos, until I read those existential situations, forcing me to tread those broken cracks in humanity. For example, in the chapter 20 of Jeremiah, facing suffering and incomprehension, persecution, these incomprehensions which come from his own confreres and sisters within the Dominican family. When one is exiled from one's country for several months in order to let the storms go past, this invites us to think about our own vulnerability. And we know wounds in our people are also our own wounds. For example, a recent time in our Rwanda, Burundi, and our vicariate, we've become aware of this, and we had a special assembly to talk about wounds, because confronting the population's, the people's wounds would bring us to ask ourselves, are we wounded healers ourselves? Are we wounded people who need to become healers? And we get the impression that this enters into the logic of the incarnation. And in the incarnation, Jesus invested himself in our life with its drama, its injustice, like a great high priest who understands and shares the suffering of people. You have the texts in the letter of the Hebrews, to the Hebrews, which I'm not going to repeat, and how Christ should come close in our situations and make us capable of understanding people's dramas and situations, because we have gone through those things and suffered with them, and develop in us the virtue of mercy, having integrated into it our own wounds. The brothers themselves realize that they don't escape these situations. And in the last year, on 17th of October 2015, 2 Rwandan students who were living in our formation community in Burundi were sequestered by the National Service in Burundi for 30 hours in the police cells, which had great impact on them and on all the brothers. And this can generate fears and phobias, impacting how they remember things, and which requires great solidarity among ourselves. Because if we stay together, coming from different ethnicities and countries, living together, even in difficult trials like this, but if we say nothing, if we said nothing, our presence would be, at least our presence would be a preaching. And so we are invited to live through this remembrance of Christ, engage in hope, and bring hope to the world in which we are, which is marked by historic wounds, but also we have to remain sensitive to what Pope Francis says, that humanity must rediscover a truly human ecology willed by God, which comes from a proximity to the poor, but also to rediscover the sense of mercy. We've just finished the year of mercy, but we know that our world has become so unmerciful. And of course, it is the fundamental value which God brings to us through the incarnation. This is what I wanted to share with you, and I thank you.
Merci.
Thank you, Brother Emmanuel.
How to heal the healed memory, especially when the memory hits in every aspect of the life of a person. And you have added something that is extremely important for all preachers, male or female preachers, how to have within ourselves our wounds, the peoples from within we preach and where we exercise our preaching. Benedict XVI said to the mendicant orders, those who are masters with the word and witnesses with the example, they know how to promote a renewal, ecclesial renewal, a profound ecclesial renewal, because they themselves are profoundly renewed and in contact with the context, the reality, and the presence of God in the Word. We could say that this afternoon, that Joaquino and our sister Marcela and our brother Emmanuel have brought us the presence of God in the world. If the organizers tell us, yes, we are here until 5:30. We have a time for question and answer, for dialogue among ourselves. I also remember you that many of us who are present, many others are following us through the internet, Facebook and YouTube, who also can bring us their questions. Now, let's open the dialogue. Let us also remember some rules. First, short questions, precise questions in order to facilitate the participation of everybody. Let us also maybe the questions from this hall and people that are in charge will bring us also from the people who are following us through the internet or any mass media. In order to facilitate the translator's work, please mention the language in which you will be speaking. And third and last, our basic principle, maybe questions could be direct to one of those, to one panelist. So just let us know to which panelist you're referring to, or maybe the question be open, and then any of the panelists could answer. There are 2 microphones in the hall, and they will be going up and down. So yes, please raise up your hand, and then, and now is your turn.
¿Alguien se anima? Sí.
Yes, someone please. Somebody wants to ask a question.
Bueno, realmente no es una pregunta mía,
It's not my question only in Spanish. It's the question that comes from the internet, and they ask us about the relationships with the indigenous peoples. How should be the relationship with the Dominican family with the indigenous peoples? Thank you, José Alberto. Quizás maybe Marcela could answer this question. I believe that history tells us, and we have just remembered in the play, a relationship in a relationship of encounter, of a profound encounter, beginning to enter into dialogue from our differences. In Bolivia, We believe that we have taken a distance from the experience in Bolivia, from that process that the peoples are living from their own initiatives, with their own dynamics, from their liturgies, we could say. Our preaching is, at least in Bolivia, is very distant, and I think it's a challenge, especially for those who are Bolivian preachers themselves, because I think the church itself is not close, but as a Dominican family, it has to do with, in the case of Bolivia especially, a reality, a human reality. We don't have the numbers anymore. Well, we don't have that presence. We have left our presence. We have in Aymaras, in the Quechuan people, in other zones of Bolivia, we don't have the presence. In the east of Bolivia, we don't have, especially in places like Peru. I think that's the situation of that moment. Yes, it's been my congregation. It's been to be close to them, to suffer what they suffer, and that brings a lot of respect to the initiatives, a respect to the different ways of living, without any, what can I say, without correcting, which is something what we do. We try to correct what other people do. That would be my approach.
No sé si
I do not know if Joaquino or Emmanuel would like to say something about that question, the same question.
Pour ce qui est
Regarding the Dominican family, I find that sisters have much better sensitivity than the brothers in a region like ours. And I think that something which is also necessary today, and we're thinking about this even in the level of the church, is that indigenous peoples do not have a great need of charity, but they understand that they have their rights and that those rights are recognized and that they are formed to defend them. So it's a question of schooling education. This has become a great challenge for us regarding this question, in order to ensure that they have the means and the resources, the skills, in order to be competitive and to defend themselves. But this is still a great labor which is underway.
sí.
I also affirm that Bolivia and many other countries, we have governments, in this case Bolivia especially, a brother, an indigenous brother. We have a president that is an indigenous. We also have a process of no need of our presence. In some moments I have asked myself, but I believe that we need to be present in spite of all that.
En español.
In Spanish, the brother has given us a question: how to heal the memory, and I would add to this also the wounded body. I want to answer from our experience as a people, as a Mayan people. We have lived 36 years of war. And just recently, in December of 2017, we have embraced 20 years of peace that has not been fulfilled. In 2013, we have had a first we have had this horrible experience about genocide 2016, a first instance for violence, of sexual violence against indigenous women. These are long years to do away from here in order to achieve reconciliation. It's a long way. And in this journey, in order to achieve truth and justice, in the way we have had a long list of martyrs, and among them Monsignor Gerardi, Bishop Gerardi, that after 2 days of gathering the memories of these people has been martyrized, that many men and women that have been assassinated yesterday, another Mayan person was assassinated. We are in a constant hope, but also in the search for justice and truth. I believe that this is going to be a long way that we have as Dominican men and women of listening, of all those wounds in our memory and in our bodies, in order to accompany the ways of searching for that truth and to heal those wounds. From our experience, from the search of healing the wound, from our own culture, from our own spirituality that is with us. And one question for Marcela, from the care of creation, care of the earth. I believe women, generally, we have more weight on this care of the earth. What does it mean at this moment in our history for the women? With so much movement, with so much change, what does it mean, the care of life? Thank you for your witness. What does it mean? What does this movement mean at this moment to the care of the earth? I believe women, we have that capacity of living at the style of like the government of Bolivia, pluricultural. We're always within this diversity. We live what comes about. In the life we grow, dies and comes back. Of course, it means a change of the indigenous that are migrant, of peoples that are migrant. In Chile, now I'm changing my country. In Chile, we are living now of the Haitian people that are arriving to Chile to work during the summertime, and many women of other countries of the world also arriving. But Chile is living a very important migration experience right now. There are in a little town of 15,000 people, there is about 100 Haitian migrants already working there. The experience of these peoples that I also know in Bolivia, when they are migrants, they are migrants with everything. They bring their culture, the women bring their culture and everything with them. That means that to take care of life with everything. It's not life. It's not just one life, but they do take care of everyone. All families taken care of, from the small ones to the old ones, to the elderly. That is the experience that I have.
¿Más preguntas?
Any other question?
Monseñor Raúl.
Bishop Raúl. It's more than a question. I want to do a comment. In a meeting in which I participated by invitation, we were in Peru. It was Sidal there. It was the Codal as well. we heard the voice of Antonieta Potente, that she was claiming, quit looking back, please. Look forward. I remember her words. Because of the humus of the humanity, of the entire humanity. Since Christ was incarnate, God is passing through, and God is speaking to us from the people that we have in front of us. The three different panelists that we have heard, they spoke from three different spaces from which God is speaking to us at this moment of our history. And also, one day in Peru, Rose of Lima, also talking to us, Dominican said, yeah, quit doing all that. Go behind the mountain. She was speaking up also about the jungle. We can say covering the mountain. There you can do a lot of good. Go forward. It's very interesting what you have, what each one of you have given to us, and truly to listen to all of you, the three of you, these three different themes that you have talked about. You have a common origin, a common beginning. What's happening in the world is a systematic violation to human rights that has to do with monopolizing of everything that means the richness, the wealth, the richness that gives us life. But there is a common background here, in the three of you, what happens on Earth is articulated. It has a common mentality behind it. Pope Francis spoke on November 3rd regarding popular movements. He said that today, money governs the world. And he takes with us all humanity. And the one that is in charge is money. I believe we Dominicans, men and women, we're in different places. And I believe now that we're in the 800 years of our foundation, I think that we cannot waste time. Thank you for reminding us of this common origin that is the source of so much evil. Anybody else? More questions, more comments? Any more interventions in order to continue to enrich this conversation? Over there? Somebody's asking for the microphone over there, please.
Ok, merci. Je vais m'adresser.
Thank you. I'm going to speak to the panelists in French. My question principally is addressed to Brother Emmanuel. I would like to begin by explaining what we're doing in Awundi. In Awundi, we have responsibility for a ministry of people engaged in decision making. And we work with these people, office holders, and I don't know if we're doing enough. It's a dialogue, formation, social doctrine of the church, to allow those people who come to us to understand what is their undertaking engagement in the church and in society, what could be their role and work in those services they provide and in the midst of the state. So the question I would like to put to you after what Brother Emmanuel spoke, which joins together things in his work. There's a civil society, and on the other side there's the state, and on another side there's even a community dynamic. I would like to ask a first question, which is to ask from his experience, what is his experience of his relation with the local church? What is your relationship with the local church, and how do you situate yourself? And is this a two-speed or two-gear relationship, or is it complementary? I don't know, but what I'd like to know is your relationship with the local church in terms of your pastoral work and apostolate. And a second question is to know, what is your experience of words or speech when humanity becomes insensitive to the word, to the prophetic dimension of God? Brother Emmanuel, questions for you to reply to. Thank you. Ministry to decision makers at the level of a whole country, whether it's politicians, those in parties, or at the heart of power, or those in the economic sector and others. This is very delicate, because there are interests at play which are not necessarily the interests of the gospel, and which require us to be vigilant, cautious. And Jesus asked his apostles to be wise as serpents, but innocent as doves. This is very relevant when we engage in this kind of apostolate. But regarding the relationship with the local church, in our context, we have found that it is essential, crucial, because when we began a few decades ago, and the Episcopal Conference had a commission on justice, a way towards peace, they asked us to be secretary of this commission. And this developed some connections between us and the Episcopal Conference. And when it was a matter of going to the National Commission, an independent commission on human rights, which is an institution of the state, it was the politicians who were speaking to the bishops to ask them for a moderator who could be dispassionate in a very polarized society. And so the bishops asked me to play this role. But, in fact, it would have been impossible to play this role if we're there only as a civil servant for the state, without having a family behind us, because it takes a lot of energy and support at a spiritual level, social level. And the support of ambassadors is okay, but the support of of people responsible in the church was very important, and becomes important to see how we work really in an integrated way in the level of the local church and in good collaboration with the Episcopal Conference. And for the time being, in our region, this collaboration is developing well, quite well. For about insensitivity to the Word of God from these people who are decision makers and so on, I think we shouldn't be too naive. You go there, you sow the word, you know that probably you can reap a certain confidence in the time, but with the political context. But you know that people who will be like the Jews who acclaimed Jesus, welcomed him to Jerusalem, were the same people who then asked for him to be crucified. Here too, we see that to have an evangelical naivety, yet knowing that Jesus was present, knowing that the people who welcomed him might be the same who would call for his death.
Je vous prie, s'il vous plaît, de...
I ask you please to ask a question as briefly as possible, because there are many people who have not yet.
I ask you that your question may be brief, because there are many people who have asked, to ask questions, and I would also ask the moderators to be brief in their answers. In Spanish, I am Leonardo Gomez, Emeritus Bishop of Colombia. I'm thankful for your participation to all of you. Justice and peace are key in the preaching of Dominican preaching since the very beginning of our founder, Saint Dominic. Yesterday, Father Carlos Aspiros was reminding us of all that yesterday when he spoke about Antonio of Montesino San Pedro de Córdoba. They always ask prophecy in order to denounce difficult situation. The most important thing is to let ourselves be converted by the preaching of the gospel, and the very first converted was Fray Bartolomé de las Casas, that being a cleric who owned slaves, came later on, became the greatest defensor of the indigenous people. We need ourselves also to be ourselves converted in order to give our life to the poor, to the service of the poor. Finally, in relationship with the themes that we are touching today, pardon and reconciliation, I also want to remind you of the experience that we have had in Colombia in the issue of peace. It hasn't been difficult. We have suffered a lot because of the war. About 15 years ago, our church began our pastoral dialogues because we believe that the closeness of us with the guerrilla people, with the military, could be the solution. And that was the example that we gave the government until the government arrived to agreements that today have given us some positive results for Colombia. All with prayer, especially with the prayer of the Holy Rosary. Thank you very much. More questions?
Allá levanta la mano.
El que manda es manda.
¿En español?
In Spanish, I wanted to ask the three people who have spoke to us. What is the vision? What is your presence about missionaries and volunteers? What is the presence within your own countries? Please repeat the question. Marcela, you don't need translation, but other people need translation. What is the feeling of your local people regarding missionaries and volunteers?
Joaquino, que estás muy en silencio.
Está bien, puedo estar en silencio.
Silence is also good. From what about the theme of migration, let me talk about in general. The local population and the communities, the local communities, the ecclesial local communities are very open to the presence of missionaries and to the presence of volunteers, especially when we're talking about lay people. But when we talk about migration, I'm going to repeat what I have had said before in my presentation. It's a harsh theme. It's controversial. People about these things are fighting against each other. Many people, just for the fact as they see the reality of the world from their point of view, and it's changing, and they do not know what to do with change, with these transformations. The only thing that many times that they do, it's anger, it's fear. They express them with violence, their own opinions. As in Italy, only Italians could live. All the foreigners need to leave. All the refugees must go. That's what they think at this moment. They are terrorists, etc., etc. All these stereotypes that are given to the refugees. In general, we can say that there is an acceptance, but when it's about the theme of migrants and refugees, it's really hard to accept for local peoples.
Dire quelque chose?
Would you like to say something? For our region, here I'm not speaking about Africa in general, I'm speaking about our own region. We don't have this tradition of new style missions and volunteers, but we have already thought about this, placing the emphasis on two things, a pro and a con. The advantage is that when we're in a difficult situation, to be isolated without feeling connected to the rest of the world, without these other people who bring us back to the Catholicity of the church, of the university, of the order. The difficulty would be a question of security. Often we're in very delicate and volatile situations. How can we be sure that there'll be a minimum of security for these missionaries or volunteers? And so we've accepted some visits for shorter periods, but we're still waiting to see those two elements, pros and cons. It's about the balance.
Marcela, this is a theme that is very complicated, especially for Bolivia. I say this because from our experience, the experience of our country is that it has continually been visited by foreigners, and then we claim in a way for a presence of the local. And in the Conference of Religious in Cochabamba, all the team was all people from other places but Bolivia. But now all are Bolivian. The face has completely changed. It's a reality in which the local want to be more local. It's not that we're rejecting, but it's a need from a process that we have lived through political years and also as church. At this moment, bishops are native Bolivians, something that Bolivia did not have before. We have a Dominican, Jorge, and I think there is also a Franciscan, and they are both Bolivian men. And I repeat, that's not a rejection, but it is a need that but these structures may start to walk. This has also created some conflict with the government when we have received some help, when we try to quit depending from funding from other countries. They are welcome, but on the way we also want to help ourselves. I am Leonardo. I'm a member of the Dominican Youth, a promoter of mission from Brazil. And the question is regarding the youth here. When we talk about suffering of human suffering, and we have different social groups that have been discredited as how our Christianism could serve in order to find a sense of life and social transformation regarding systems that are oppressing. Sometimes our own institutions are oppressors and they don't bring freedom, and different other ideologies. Who would like to answer to this question that come from the youth of our order? Joaquino? Do you understand the question? It's difficult to answer this question. This is a $1 million question. This is a €1 million question since we are in Europe. Our youth, young people, I see that this is my impression. I see a lot of, how could I say? I see a lot of commitment on the part of the youth. I see a lot of openness to the different social problematic. I see, on the other hand, I see very little attention to what is the political dimension of these social dimensions, but that the political dimension is very important. Little by little, the youth are abandoning this area that is very important, this area in which many things are decided. For example, the destiny of migrants and refugees. Therefore, I would like, for example, ideally, most of the participation of the youth in politics. I would like to see this in the sense of the most noble sense of the world. As Pope Francis said, the politics is the most noble form of charity. I think that this is what Pope Francis have said many things, and this needs a lot of openness to be formed in this field.
Tiempo para 3 preguntas más, ¿vale?
3 preguntas.
3 more questions. We have time for 3 more questions.
Monseñor Roger, allá también hay otra mano.
Allá ha pedido antes.
Sí, Marcela me recuerda que se agradecería brevedad en la pregunta.
Please be brief on your questions.
Panelists, and each of you presented a narrative of a wounded humanity. And I'm beginning to ask, is there any good news? If so, what is the good news?
Marcela. Frère Emmanuel, est-ce que No sé si han comprendido bien la pregunta.
I do not know, Father Emmanuel, if you have understood the question well.
Je ne sais pas si j'ai bien compris.
I do not know if I've properly understood the question. I do not know if you're expecting any great success, spectacular success. Because when Jesus began his public ministry, preaching in Luke chapter 4, he says that he's come to bring the good news to the poor. And then looking at the list of people he mentions, they're the difficulties that we are talking about already here. Those who are wounded, those who are excluded in economics, those who are crushed politically, and so on. This universe this is right at the beginning of his preaching in Luke chapter 4. And I think that the good news, the gospel, is exactly this presence to those people in those categories that God himself has privileged or chosen to be in solidarity with these people. And he manifests solidarity with everyone, in their fragility, weaknesses. If we look at those rich people with whom Jesus had contact, he touched those rich people, but in their own poverty.
Stella, would you like to say something? I'd like to say, I'm going to repeat some of that. Emmanuel said, our presence is not to abandon. We're here with all the re-establishing of things. We are trying to abandon relationships. And these relationships generate solidarity with the preaching that translates in good news, so they could live. If they live this continuous abandonment, then the people that lived in the mountains, they keep asking us, "Are you gonna go again? Are you leaving us again?" They don't need our material presence in that way, but they say to us, they remind us that God doesn't abandon us. Only two more questions.
Se escucha. En mi opinión,
in my opinion, the good news, especially in the field of migrants and refugees, that we are doing a lot. In my presentation, I said it. There are a lot of efforts done by the church and by civil society together with the Catholic Church, and that's the good news. But I would like that this good news may not be only the work of a few, but this should be the work of all the church, of all God's people. Therefore, my question, when we are all preachers, especially all of you, how many times we preach, or you have preached the word of God, the word, with the situation of the refugees and the situation of migrants? How many times have we related God's word to their situation? But if we relate it, then we are preaching good news to God's people. Last question.
I'm from Pakistan, a country which is affected by war on terror very heavily from the last 15 years, and so our people are IDPs, migrant in their own country, their own land, facing terrorism, fanaticism, blasphemy laws, fear, perplexed situation where we pray in the churches having heavy security, lots of threats. All the institutions are not safe, not the educational or the other institutions and the churches and the mosques.
So my question is, how to preach, how to incarnate the Word of God in the life of such people, those who are facing this situation. And the other thing is, now people are living indifferently from all what is happening around. If 20 people die, nobody cares. So how to preach the gospel in this situation?
Thank you, Father. Monseñor Roger, yo creo que tenemos que formular la última pregunta de la tarde, ¿no?
We give you, Monsignor Roger, we give him the opportunity to ask the last question of this afternoon.
My question is addressed to Brother Emmanuel about our task of preaching, which must try to heal the wounds. Can we take into account as well the question of truth in the sense of the work which the commissions of truth and reconciliation have been doing? Because when we don't shine a light on what has happened or knowing who is responsible, when we put that into parenthesis, this question, I think we don't do anything good really for reconciliation. So this is a question I would like to raise, how it works in certain number of countries in Western Africa, where we had the great realization, but without this work of truth, and so this is a wound we need to heal. Thank you. Thank you, Brother Emmanuel. Would you like... I'm not speaking about the question on Pakistan. I imagine others will talk about that. Regarding the healing of wounds through knowing the truth, as you know, these questions of reconciliation, political reconciliation, is a fairly recent phenomenon. And we only see some universities like Notre Dame in America, which have begun to think about this, what this means. And the mechanism of transitional justice of various sorts, it's only in recent years that we're trying this out. And it's giving various results which are not the same if you take Southern Africa, South Africa, or Argentina with their commission, or Sierra Leone with their commission, and other countries. We see that it's something very complex, where it requires a socio-political climate to enable, and even when it's succeeded, it doesn't mean that everything's worked out very quickly. It requires the church also, the preachers, to find a way to insert themselves into this sector, because if we just talk about the Chacha in Rwanda after genocide, it's not just a political context, but it's also in the Catholic Church. And so I think that the specialists who are thinking about these questions have shown sufficiently that if you don't speak about the truth, which that the people have a right to the truth on what happened, but also that you put justice in its true place, not just the justice of the tribunal, but in the wider sense of justice, give its due, but also the sector of reparation, also the work on reforms, institutional reforms, so that what had happened would not happen again. These four pillars are essential, and to have them all together is very complicated, but the Church can certainly contribute with its own contribution. And I know that in our country or in the Congo, the Church is working on this, or in Rwanda, despite the various weaknesses of the Church, it works. The Burundi, the Church is working. The Church has a contribution to make. There, we have to stop.
The different panelists, they renounce of saying the last word, but I would like to say no, not a last word, but just Jordan of Saxony said about Saint Dominic that he was able to enter in the difficult questions thanks to his humble intelligence of heart. We are about to celebrate Eucharist. May this celebration make us a little bit more humble so we can enter in the most difficult questions. Thank you so much.
Before we go, thank you for your patience. Just a few announcements. The first and most important is that the Eucharist will be delayed until 7 o'clock at Santa Sabina. So the Eucharist will be at 7 o'clock at Santa Sabina. Two general things for everyone. The first is thank you for your participation. On behalf of the Scientific Committee, we really feel your participation, your questions, and especially your dialogues in the workshops are very important. What is said in the workshops will be brought back to the committee so that your voices will be heard in what comes out at the end. So please continue your great participation. Those who will be participating in the workshop by Eric and Natalia tomorrow or the day after, since it is on media, please bring a laptop, tablet, phone, whatever you have. It would be very helpful. So those are the two general announcements. The other ones are for facilitators. As you know, our secretary is ill, so there's some communication issues. So just a few things. For facilitators, please do check the lists that will be outside tomorrow. They will be correct. They were not correct today. They will be corrected for tomorrow. So please check the lists tomorrow. Secondly, the reports of the facilitators on their workshops, please give them to me by tomorrow morning, either by email, or I know a lot of you are writing them out in hard copies, so by tomorrow morning, facilitators. And the third thing that's important around the workshops, please, if you're giving a workshop tomorrow, if you need technology, PowerPoint, computer, anything like that, please come and see me, because there is a miscommunication on technology. So if you're giving a workshop and require technology, please come and see me right after this. And for those of you who've sent in your handouts, they are ready. You can pick them up at the Secretariat tomorrow. So facilitators, please remember that, and workshop leaders for technology, please come and see me. And last, I think that there's a brief word. J'invite le frère Aléanor pour prendre la parole.
Just 1 minute. Once you'll be at Santa Sabina, you will also be able to see the exhibition which was set up on occasion of the Jubilee. The exhibition is in 3 parts. One part is in the piazza, which is 5 photographs by our brother Adam Rokos, who might be here. 5 photographs on the Incarnation. In the church, you will find 18 banners presenting Dominican personalities throughout the ages from all different countries. They were produced by Dominican artists from the Dominican family all over the world. And the third part is a non-Dominican artist who was invited to come and show 12 installations within the cloisters and the church and the garden and the narthex of Santa Sabina. There is a catalogue for each of the 3 parts. The library will be open at Santa Sabina. You have the covers here, and you are warmly invited to buy these catalogues. And for the Congress, we have a reduced price. You can have all 3 catalogues for 30 euros. 2 more elements here about this exhibition. You will see the banners hanging in the side naves of the church. They are available for you, for your schools, for your parishes, for your priories, wherever in the world. They are very easy to transport, so if you like to show them to your students, to the parishioners, whatever, just contact me. I will try and organize this. And the same is true for the photographs of Adam Rokos. Just get in touch, and they are available for you wherever you are. Thank you very much.
No. There is no buses for Santa Sabina. Today I will state the first pilgrimage. So we will go to Santa Sabina walking. No. No. Es una peregrinación.
It's a pilgrimage to Santa Sabina. We are going to walk.